studying philosophy of immigration this term has been really interesting to me, particularly as a second-gen immigrant myself, and examining not just how the ethics around the closed border or open borders debate is, but the ethics around enforcement of immigration and how that then ends up affecting people, and then how does that then change how we then view the states in our own countries as legitimate or illegitimate states who are just acting out of fear of or xenophobia or racism. So I find that really interesting to study this term.
Yeah, because I think one of the things I've thought, at least, before actually starting in philosophy and particularly doing applied ethics, is that it's always in the abstract. And then I think this is a case of where it can really have the how matters, how things are carried out, then has proper ethical kind of implications on whether something's right or wrong. And I think that's something that talking about immigration and the philosophy with that has kind of brought to light for me.
Yeah, because I really do feel like there was this kind of misconception that I had, not having studied philosophy before uni, that you would go in and you would talk about all these things that, because I enjoy learning, I will enjoy, but what will actually, will something good or something meaningful come out of that? And I feel like the examples you brought up really shines light on how philosophy is so current and so important, and especially when it comes to looking at states and state structures as well, and that we're just not sitting in a vacuum talking about philosophy with each other, but we're actually trying to integrate that into different social and other social science bits. Yeah. I think was it you mentioned it before?
Yeah, so how philosophy is very much intertwined with a lot of political theory, sociology, psychology, even the sciences. You see a lot of philosophy where everything is connected because that's how human beings interact, and so a lot of philosophers that we do end up studying, whether it's Bell Hooks, Audre Lorde, Franz Fanon, they all kind of bring it back to the fact that human beings are human beings, we're strange creatures, and we interact with one another, not just in this vacuum that I think a lot of those very old dusty philosophers who we all very much criticize a lot, they all very much kind of think, oh yes, it's an abstract construct and nothing really matters as long as you just go out into the world and exist for yourself. That's not how we are.
And I think something that I really like about the way that we're kind of taught to engage with it here is kind of we can all really bring our own perspectives into it. So even though Welsh politics and Welsh social theory isn't really discussed, it's because that is something going on in my personal life back home, there's a big independence movement for Welsh independence going on in Wales right now, and it causes a lot of debates, but discussing kind of open/closed borders and how you would enforce those borders led me to kind of thinking about that in the context of, if Wales were to be independent, how would that then be enforced? Would it be a hard border, a soft border between Northern Ireland and the Republic? And it was just I think you could draw a lot from general philosophical theory and then apply it to your own context quite easily.
Yeah, definitely.
And I also find that you can apply a lot of philosophy theories into the society in a way that how people interact with people. So I was talking about beauty norms that I've learned in last semester. So because I am coming from the South, I'm coming from Asia, and there's a beauty norm in Asia, especially in South Korea and in Japan, that women going out without makeup, going to work and going to universities are seen as a kind of impolite actions. But my friend, who's also from China, and she migrated to Germany, and in Germany, if you put makeup on, if you want to go for work, if you want to go to university, you will be seen as overdressed. So I'm kind of thinking about in certain extent, actually anti-beauty norms are also a kind of suppressed for women. It's not just, it's also a kind of beauty norms, because in the end of the day, even you are going anti-beauty norms, but you're still judging people by appearance, like that.
I really enjoyed looking at was the prison-industrial complex, because I have always been a critic of, I suppose, the British justice system and how it enacts so-called justice, particularly for like survivors of sexual assault, and then also how it ends up, criminalizing particularly young Black people. So it was very interesting to realize, like, even me being very critical of it, I still had these assumptions of, okay, what does a criminal look like? And then you realize, there's a class element with that you don't even realize is there, but then you realize, no, the justice system was actually set up to, correct working class people, and you're wondering why you're being corrected, and then going into all those. So that's, I think, really interesting, and again, brings it back to the reality of human beings and then how we interact with one another, because the prison industrial system is an extension of the state, which is all around us all the time, and then that affects how we view other people. So like, I'm viewed as more criminal by certain other people because of the colour of my skin, and so it's that was like a very interesting part of philosophy that we did, it was last term, so that was really fun to learn.
Yeah, I think linking that kind of to immigration and what we were talking about with that, it's kind of that kind of how your social identity and appearance, like really morally arbitrary things like skin colour you were talking about, how that then has such a big impact in kind of how we construct an identity for someone. So in terms of migration, how we talked about socially undocumented people, and how rather than it's necessarily the legal status of someone that makes them subject to oppression and kind of marginalisation in society, it's actually kind of the social identity that they have that then causes them to experience these kind of injustices in society. And I think maybe that's a parallel then between the two
was that
systems.
Amy Reid Sandoval?
It was.
Yeah, where she brings up the example of the young Hispanic woman who was not a migrant, but she's still very viewed as through an immigrant lens because she's Latina. It was a lot of unfortunate parallels.
I think the example with like the young Hispanic woman as well, and like the contrast between her and the white British man from the UK, and how both of them, even though both of them were legally undocumented and living in the US, only one of them was really the victim of an injustice because, or the victim of, I would say like an injustice because her, and it was the Hispanic woman, because she was assumed to be undocumented, whereas the white man from Britain was not. And I think it develops a lot from we can develop that thought into like challenging assumptions that we have about like societies that we live in, like what you said about like beauty standards across different in different geographies. And what I really love about philosophy is that it just kind of teaches us to challenge a lot of things that a lot of people just automatically assume to be correct. And I think it's just a wonderful subject, really.
Kind of coming from that bit of identity as well, one thing that was something completely new to me that we're doing this term in one of my ethics modules is talking about emotion. And how emotion can be so incredibly tied to the social. So we're talking especially about shame, which I found super interesting, in how shame is kind of, by a lot of people, viewed as this social emotion, and that depending on what kind of group you feel like you're belonging to, or what kind of moral system you're existing in, you're kind of viewed as you might ought to feel shame for different things. So I think, for instance, me being here, if I just stood up and like walked away now, you would kind of be like, what's going on? And I might feel a little bit like, oh, maybe I should feel ashamed for that because I was like doing something I shouldn't do. And how me being maybe part of this small group influences that, whilst if I were in some other context where that would be appropriate, maybe a society where like pushing you like this will be okay, then that would completely influence the way we view things. And I think that's super, super interesting. Yeah.
And I think like the philosophy of emotions can like just reach so far into everything, like every aspect of our lives. Like you were talking about like work that you were doing on like sexual violence and stuff, and like I'm writing something on that right now for one of my classes, and it's just like the way that we don't really think about emotions beyond experiencing them, but the way that they like just challenging the assumptions that we have about emotions and what somebody should feel in a given context it can like radically alter like the way you approach your life just by like querying one small facet of it.
Because that was actually something that came up in like my research. So as we were saying, the social construction of shame, there's a reason that the police don't often view certain groups of women as proper victims, because they've been conditioned not to feel or present a certain way when going to the police and reporting such crime. So I can speak, for example, like being a black woman, like we're supposed to be like strong and, you know, very capable. So if I were to go to the police and say I've been assaulted, I wouldn't be particularly viewed as a victim, as a perfect victim in comparison to like my white counterparts, for example. And so that was really interesting to me, because then it was looking at, okay, in the black community, how is it that black women are being constructed to feel and act a certain way? And then also, again, having the society read into that and the consequences of that, which I'm finding really interesting.
Yeah, like I'm reading The Right to Sex by Amir Shrinivasan right now, and there's a really good passage on like just the way that black women are sexualized, how they're desexualized, and the way that, and like its relation to pornography and things.
Yeah.
And like it's such a, I think it's important to kind of be able to know that social constructions of our identity are never really caused by like the individuals or like the groups whose identity is being constructed. It's almost always usually constructed by like the power, like who holds the most power.
The patriarchy.
I mean, yeah. But then when you kind of give voice to the actual members of those groups, kind of completely dismantles everything that is constructed.
And I think that's a really fun part of philosophy, in that you very much then get to examine, so this was just wrong. You like, you do kind of like look at things and you go, oh wow, so I was just wrong. And that's a really good thing, I think. I think it's a really good thing if you can come away from a philosophy seminar or a philosophy lecture and thinking, I was wrong about that. Or even sometimes feeling vindicated. I was like, oh, I was right about that. There's somebody who wrote a paper and I'm like, oh wow, I'm right about this. I was like reading Angela Davis and I was like, I was right. I was right. Like, the prison-industrial complex system is racist. I was right. Angela Davis backs me up in that. It's a really great thing, because, of course, when we live in a world that very much, you know, invalidates experiences based on, you know, people's anecdotes, which I think is another issue of validity. But, you know, it's very like warming when you just get like that confirmation that, oh yeah, something is wrong, but here is like the proof and being taught how to like write an essay where I can successfully argue that. It's really fun.
Because I think realising you're kind of in the wrong is so important as well. Like, I remember going into first year being like, oh, this is what I believe, this is my moral system, and I'm right. Yeah. And then you come in and you're like, oh, wait a second, this person believes that, maybe they have a point, and maybe I should rethink that. And I think what philosophy really teaches you to do is take things that you might have thought were granted and reevaluate them. And I think even if you're not at the same point as you were in the start, you've still done something really important by just reevaluating your thoughts, because like you said, then you're able to really argue for them and articulate them. And I think that's really where philosophy has been so valuable to my life, because I feel like I can come out now on the other side and be like, well, I kind of know why I think this. It's not something that I'm just like kind of going with the flow and other people think, but I know why. And I can kind of, if someone asks me like, why do you believe this, I can be like, well, this is why. Yeah.